The Destruction of Sennacherib was written about a real biblical story that Lord Byron would have read from the Bible and was based on a real historical event, which was about the Assyrian army storming Jerusalem and invading that in the kingdom of Judah thousands of years ago. So Lord Byron was trying to write an account of this story in his poetry book, Hebrew Melodies, and was trying to express some of the ideas of that Bible story. And so what happens in the biblical text is that the Assyrian army, great powerful empire of an army, came into Jerusalem, attempted to invade, but were stopped short before the battle even began by God. As in the Bible story, God commissions an angel of death to breathe upon the army and to kill the Assyrians before they even enter Jerusalem. So that's the basic text. It's trying to express that story and trying to show what happens in that tale. Contextually, then, that's what you would mainly talk about. You would discuss the fact that it comes from a Bible story and therefore is kind of following a thread that you get many times in the Bible of the Jewish people being God's chosen people and showing how God will protect and will look after his people. As we see, you've probably read in RE the story of Moses freeing the Jewish slaves from Egypt, and such like. And so this is of that thread, showing how God will always protect the chosen people, the Jews. But at the same time, we know that Lord Byron would have been part of that group of political radicals, the Romantics, and would possibly have had views about the kind of wars that were going on at his time. So writing it during the Napoleonic Wars, it's very likely that he would have been interested in the kind of modern invasions, the modern warfare that was happening, and possibly was making a comment on the tyrants, showing how they don't always have ultimate power, and sometimes they can end tragically with a bit too much hubris. And it's possible that he was trying to make links between the Assyrian army's failure, as he shows in this poem, their kind of arrogance storming into battle, and the kind of tyrannical empires going to war that he would have seen all around him. Because he was a romantic poet, Lord Byron would have been really interested in dramatic scenes, intense emotions, and this is definitely what we get in this poem. Very vivid, powerful images and strong emotional content. So let's read through the poem and let's see if there's any interesting language choices that we can pick apart and we can comment on. It goes like this. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, and the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea, when the blue wave rolls nightly on deep Galilee. So that stanza is all about the powerful Assyrian army coming to invade, who sound incredibly impressive. Second stanza, though, there's a twist. Like the leaves of the forest when summer is green, that host, with their banners at sunset were seen. But, like the leaves of the forest when autumn have blown, that host on the morrow lay withered and strown. So in a split second in that stanza, we have them riding like summer full of life to suddenly they've died. They lay withered on the floor. In the very next morning, the morrow. Let's read why. For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts once heaved, and forever grew still. And there laid a steed, the horse, with his nostril all wide, but through it there rolled not the breath of his pride, and the foam of his gasping lay white on the turf, and cold as the spray of the rock-beating surf. So there we have a description of the dead horses and steeds on the floor, drooling and frothing with saliva as they've been slaughtered. And there lay the rider, distorted and pale, with the dew on his brow and the rust on his mail, and the tents were all silent, the banners alone, the lances unlifted, the trumpet unblown. We see there that they never even lifted their weapons or blew the trumpets. The battle never began before God and the angel of death came and destroyed the Syrian army. And the windows of Asher are loud in their wail, and the idols are broke in the temple of Baal, and the might of the Gentile, unsmote by the sword, have melted like snow in the glance of the Lord. So that last stanza is describing how the enemies of the Jews, the people who believed in different gods in the temple of Baal, different religions, would have been in tears, in grieving, as their idols, what they worshipped, would have been smashed. And the non-Jews, which is what the word Gentile means, were not killed by swords, but instead were destroyed by just the power of God who came in to solve the situation. So let's pick apart some of the language here and let's understand how Lord Byron is describing this powerful scene, this destruction of Sennacherib's army. Sennacherib would have been the general, the king leading the Assyrians. Firstly, we've got this colour symbolism at the start. Do you see how the Assyrians are described as gleaming in purple and gold? Purple is not a colour that comes very easily or naturally. It's something that you would need exotic dyes to produce. And so perhaps he's getting across some of the exotic, strange nature of the Assyrians. And the colour gold we know symbolises wealth and power. So all of this in the first stanza seems to make the Assyrians very powerful and impressive. They seem like a very impressive army, but impressive in the way that comes from earthly power. Gold, money, possessions, material goods, not from the kind of great spiritual power of God that the Jews have on their side. The most famous line in the poem is this simile at the start, like the wolf on the fold. We often get in poems and in your GCSE texts, humans compared to animals. You might call it zoomorphism, which is when you give humans animalistic characteristics. Well, I think here, comparing the army to wolves, or the Assyrian general like a wolf, I think that very much makes them seem savage, like predators, gives them a huge sense of power. So oddly, at the start of the poem, he's really building up a sense of how powerful and impressive the Syrian army are, when in fact they don't end up surviving the battle against God. So you get that contrast here, that we assume they must be so powerful that the Jewish army have no chance. And in fact, that comes as a surprise that there's a twist in the second stanza, a sudden volta that we see that actually they are easily swept away, melted like snow. We've also got this parallel structure in the volta. So we get a first, it's described as summer being green. Well, we know that summer is a symbol of life. The army seem full of life, full of power, full of energy, like when summer is green. But then even in the same stanza, very suddenly, sudden movement, we get the description of autumn being blown. And we know that autumn is a symbol of death. And so we get a sudden, almost instant switch from the life of the army to the death of the army in an instant, in one breath. The final line of the poem is also a simile. We get the line melted like snow, and we always imagine snow melting with ease, very gently, calmly, silently, but being completely powerless, turning from a solid to a liquid. And so perhaps that's what Lord Byron is getting to us to imagine has happened to the Assyrian army after being melted, killed, murdered by the angel of death. The imagery in the middle is all about the destruction of the army, and quite opposite to how powerful they seem in the beginning. In the middle of the poem, they seem powerless, weak, pathetic almost, piteous. And so when we hear the foam gasping through the horse's mouth, that's not a very flattering image. There's something quite pathetic about it, something quite sad and almost grotesque. This is not an impressive, brave image anymore. And so that the view of the Assyrian army is completely changed. Likewise with the imagery of the trumpet being unblown. Trumpets are supposed to be a call for an army to feel proud marching in, a symbol, a trumpet blare, showing the invasion. And the fact it was never blown perhaps, quashes that. Finally then, we have to work out what we would compare this to. Another poem in which destruction of an army is very relevant is Exposure. There it's described from the army's own perspective, how they feel destroyed by the weather, by forces of nature, forces much greater than themselves. In that one, actually, it almost takes a kind of an anti-religious stance as it tries to express about the army. We get the line, love of God seems dying, quite the opposite of what this poem's trying to show. As in Sennacherib, we get the almost celebration, veneration of God's power. In Exposure, it's criticising almost the powerlessness that God seems to have over the situation to stop the suffering. Charge of the Light Brigade, similarly, about the destruction of an army, there through human hands because it was by the cannon fire, but a similarly helpless situation in which people were completely surrounded. And finally, Poppies, an interesting poem that also discusses war and grief, but from the perspective of somebody who was not a soldier themselves. And so we get lots of comparisons in Poppies and Sennacherib between natural imagery being used, between uniforms being described in a powerful way, but underneath it all, a sense of death being inevitable. Good luck and have a go at comparing one of these yourself. You can do it.